Imani banja sikapadani silena boga sampada silena niputing yanti tasma silang visodaye. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, I'm going to give you a talk on the nature of security, the sense of safety, and also the illusion of control. So the idea of this is that it's going to help you with your meditation and reflecting on your life, because these are the ways that often people cling with security, then they get very nervous and it leads to often conflict. And also we should look at the illusion of control. It's a big part of anatta and anicca. And then it leads to dukkha. The more that we're trying to control, the more that we're trying to keep control when it would be better to let go and go with a more flowing and flexible way, then we're going to have much more relaxed life and much more calm. And that is the path to nibbana. Kima, it's called. Okay. So talk 15, unidentified, scarial phenomena. Talk on the nature of security. The illusion of control. In this talk, we explore the nature of security. Not practical security, but the psychological security the mind tries to manufacture through control, through identity, through certainty, through status, through narratives, and through belonging, through permanence and security. Again and again, beneath different situations, one question quietly repeats. What exactly are we trying to secure? And can any of it truly be secured? We want security. But do we demand certainty? Are they the same thing? We attempt to manage outcomes in order to feel safe. But life is not really controllable at that very fine scale. I was once asked by Venerable Saranankara, the chief abbot of Sentul Temple, to go to Kuching, Sarawak, and to give a talk. It was the festival of the hungry ghosts. I agreed, and I read up on the Petavatu, the book called The Mansions of the Hungry Ghosts, which is in the Pali Canon. He supplied the return flight ticket, and I was there for about, I think, 4 days, giving talks, and then on the way back, I would be flying, but it would be middle of the night. At the end of the last talk, people gave a large stack of red envelopes. And at the time, I was trying not to touch money. But I thought, is it rude to say no? And anyway, I thought, I can pass it to someone somehow usefully. And I took the small stack of red ornamental envelopes and put them in my bag. I was dropped at the airport, checked in at 10 p.m. or so, and I trolleyed through the largely empty Kuching airport. At the far end, there was a desk. I headed towards it. It was the only thing that was lit up. There was a security guard. He pointed. There was a ramp. There was an aeroplane. I went up the ramp. I sat down in the aeroplane. They came around checking the tickets. Everyone else's was a different colour to mine. Oh dear. Quickly they say, quick, get down the ramp. It's along 2 gates, and then that's where your gate is. I'd been pointed to this one by the security guard. So I was fuming, raced down, turned right, up the ramp. No aeroplane there. It had already just left. It was taxiing on the airstrip. What was I going to do? There was an empty airport. One slightly dim security guard. And who knows, nothing else. So I went over to him, trying to contain my rage. He'd pointed me to the wrong aeroplane without even checking my ticket, after all. Anyway, he got the gist that I needed to find a new flight and pointed to a far distant, lonely single desk that was still open. It was some kind of airline booth. So I went over to the counter. Sure enough, there was one light, one person sitting there. And I said, "Excuse me, I just missed my flight." And it began to somehow explain the tragic misdirection and the fault all being the security guards. And they said, "Oh, you can catch the one at 3 a.m. I said, "Okay." And they said, "But you know, that will be about 300 ringgit," or whatever it was. There was no talk about bypassing this or a refund or anything. Wait, I realized that in my bag, fortunately, I was holding all the money, all the ang paos, all the red envelopes. So I opened them up, counted them out. The money was exactly enough for the ticket. One of those strange coincidences in life. It's kind of a beautiful synchronicity that can happen when you just trust things and let go. What would I have done if I hadn't accepted the ang pao and I'd been all sort of snobby and gone, "No, I'm not touching money." Been stuck. So it wasn't a story about coincidence or magic luck. It illustrates how quickly our sense of security collapses when plans fail. We think control guarantees safety. Yet, when certainty disappears, what actually matters is not control, but the steadiness of mind that responds to that. And the moral is that control is not the same as care. I'd planned the journey, the flights were all booked, everything appeared organized. Yet one wrong gesture from the security guard, and the whole thing collapsed like a pack of cards. Planning is responsible, but clinging to the outcomes, something else. Today's theme is the nature of security, which is ironic that it was a security guard, the person paid to guard my security, who set this whole chain of events in motion. I should have looked at checked my gate number instead of just trusting fully the guard and just going on. He was trying to be helpful, he was well-intentioned, night guard. So, unidentified Scarial phenomena. The racing heart of threat detection versus imagination. On one occasion, I was very, very exhausted. It was actually a full moon, and I was in Chiang Mai in Thailand, at my original temple, so 1987. I was really needing a break, really feeling not being under pressure. A lot of pressure at that time. So, I spoke with my abbot, and immediately snapped his fingers and asked for a driver to take me somewhere way up in the remote temples, up in the mountains. I didn't really know where we were going. The car just drove up into the mountains towards the royal palace that overlooks Chiang Mai. But it didn't stop there. It carried on into the depths of the heartland behind it. The abbot had about 53 temples all around. There were many hill tribe villages. And finally, it reached one very remote valley with a temple. By then, it was 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the early evening. They dropped me off with my bag and left me there. I was introduced to the abbot. That was it. He said, "There's your space, there's your room." I got in. I was exhausted. One of the first things I did was, as soon as I unpacked, was hit the bed and go into a deep sleep. I woke up sometime later. Could have been 10 o'clock at night, could have been 11. Fully refreshed. I'd slept for about 4 hours and felt completely renewed. So I lay there, blinking, looking at the ceiling, looking around. What to do? I opened the door and there was bright light everywhere. It was a full moon. So I decided, well, I'm wide awake. I might as well go for a little walk. I can see clearly. There was a road width track that went forward along the valley. I walked along it. On one side was a deep valley going down, and up the other side, full of trees. It was perfectly clear. To my left, there was a clear sky, and up on, there was something like a red planet, just stopped in the sky, very distinct. Must be Mars, I thought. I casually looked the other side, and there was a hill rising to my right. There was the full moon. Beautiful golden moon. I noticed there were some strange shapes in the top of the ridge, and some steps where I'd stopped, leading up. It looked like some kind of sanctuary up there, some kind of temple structure. It was quite dark under the trees and bushes, but I could see the outline. The stairs led exactly up to that structure, above which was the full moon. The full moon, the temple structure, and the stairs, and the other way, Mars, or on the other side, all completely, perfectly aligned. That looked significant, I thought. I wondered if I should go up and have a look at the temple buildings. Okay, I'll go up. So, started climbing up the stairs. I got about halfway, paused. There was an odd illusion. It looked like there was a sort of Lord of the Rings figure up there. A hooded figure in dark robes hanging there. It looked exactly like that. I thought that's very odd. It's actually quite scary, but no problem. I'll go a bit closer. If I flip my computer around, you might even be able to look at the screen, because it's not very, very clear, right, is it? I'll put this round so you guys can look at it if I can. I don't know if I even can. I don't even know if with all of this stuff if I can flip it around that easy. Hold on. Yeah, listen to it like a radio program. You might see, I think you'll see some of it, but this is a dark story with a lot of dark stuff and it's not showing up very clearly. You'll be able to see it on the YouTube on your phone later on. Okay. I thought it might be some sort of washing on a line or something, or a statue, something like that. But so I went up a few more steps. As I got closer, it looked even more like a hooded figure standing in the middle of an open area. I thought, now, that's pretty scary. And I noticed my heart started to race. I went up a few more steps and stopped. It was a hooded figure standing there with 2 legs, 2 feet on the ground, with a sort of hooded cow like this. And it was slightly moving and wobbling as it looked at me like that. And it was facing my direction. There was a strange sort of smoke or mist rising from around the hood. I was pretty scared. The hairs on my neck all stood up. What is it? I thought. I'd said, I've either got to run, in which case I'm going to be more scared because it might come after me, or I'm going to find out what it is, and then I won't be scared, hopefully. So with my heart racing, I went up a few more steps. I started to see 2 red lights where the eyes should be, floating around like that. A little bit closer, more. Bearing in mind, I'm slightly short-sighted. I need glasses. I thought I'd better say something. I went closer and I said, hello? And the little figure went, whoa! It was a little novice monk, and he had his robes over their top like this to keep the mosquitoes off. And he was holding incense sticks. 2 little incense sticks in front of him to keep the mosquitoes away, like that. While he was doing his walking meditation in the middle of the night. He'd been terrified seeing me coming up the stairs. You know? I don't think the abbot had told him that I'd arrived. As far as he was concerned, I was a sort of scary alien coming towards him. Just to show you that there's imagination and there's threat detection. And often they can come together, as they did in that moment. And the moral is that the mind hates not knowing. The most uncomfortable moment wasn't unidentified scarial phenomena, the ghostly alien part. It's the doubt. It's the uncertainty. It's not knowing, is it dangerous? It's not knowing what it is. There's ambiguity. The mind prefers a wrong explanation over no explanation. We demand certainty because not knowing feels unsafe. But security, safety, and certainty are not identical. So a bit about decision fatigue. Modern overchoice as a kind of way of controlling, fake way of looking like we're controlling things. Choice can be a kind of illusion of control. The more options we're given, the more we feel like we are steering our lives. Yet, the multiplication of options, like in a supermarket, does not necessarily increase stability. It simply increases decision making. That can simply lead to anxiety and indecision through overload. Do I want this? Do I want that? Do I want that? Do I want this? Modern society makes a huge virtue of freedom, freedom of choice. You are free to choose. The assumption is that more choice equals more security, more control, more agency, perhaps more identity. This was brought to my attention during a visit to Singapore, where a hosting supporter bombarded me with non-stop with choices about everything. Where to eat, what cuisine, which drink, which dessert, what variations, what options. It felt generous, but oddly exhausting. Would you like this or this? Would you like that or the other? Would you like mild cheddar cheese or strong cheddar? Or Italian? Would you like it grated or block? It was strangely confusing and disorienting. When I was in Thailand training, we accepted all foods without even hardly looking at it. After 3 years, I hardly knew any of the names for any kind of food. The food items were hardly commented on. Years later, I was a layman in London, and an excited person hearing I'd been in Thailand was introduced to me. And they, having visited Thailand, wanted to remember and recite and show off the names of all the Thai menu items they knew and check with me. When it turned out I knew almost none of the names of any of the food, they turned deeply suspicious and suspected that I'd been lying about being in Thailand at all. How much is that doggy in the window? Do you know that song? It's from way back. Previously to ordaining in 2010, I was working largely with one sound company that provided sound equipment for very high-end banquets and expensive events. So I got used to the world of sound and events, and I was looking forward to vanishing into the deepest part of Burma, where there was an intensive silent retreat. 16 hours of meditation a day for 60 days. I knew it was going to be very tough psychologically. So I trained myself in Sri Lanka, practicing 14 hours a day of intensive meditation for a long time to get ready and build up the mental strength. When I arrived in Myanmar and was taken to Bago forest, it was somewhat of a shock to discover that I was going to be confronted with a different kind of challenge than I was expecting. Firstly, there was a week-long wedding happening in the neighboring field, which had an enormous PA system. So far from being a silent kind of retreat, no, we were flooded with Burmese pop music 24 hours a day, 7 days, like this, because of the wedding. Not having brought any earplugs, it was a great challenge. Next, near the center of the temple in Bago Forest, it has a tower, and they have 4 PAs of their own facing in different directions. Leonard wants to build one here, just a warning. So on top of the neighboring party music 24/7, we had the alarm call, the temple bell telling you it was time to wake up and time to go to the hall, time for breakfast, time for lunch, time for all the different things. They had a digital sample of some strange, really irritating bells, like church bells or something on it. I got really fed up with it. Becoming irritated, one day I decided to do something a little bit sneaky, I have to admit, and it was probably slightly unethical. Next to the tower and the bell speakers, there was a book on the table where yogis could write down, make comments, requests, or complaints of any kind. So what I did was complain about the bell in about 8 different handwritings, as if 8 different people were all complaining about it. Bordering on deception, I have to say, but it was kind of worth it for a while. They changed the bell sound. Guess what they changed it to? They changed it to the sound of Big Ben from London. So now, just because of my sneaky action, where I wrote down the complaints, could you change the bells in about 8 different handwritings and using different pens to make it look like different people were doing it? They changed it to the bells of Big Ben. I was free from England and I was away in Asia, and suddenly, every few hours, I had to listen to the sound of Big Ben, the chimes of Westminster Abbey from central London. On top of that, there wasn't a clock working in any of the meditation halls. There wasn't anyone in our sleeping compound area either. So they went out and they bought a load of clocks and started putting them up everywhere. Now in Myanmar, most of the clocks seem to be imported from China, and they usually get this cheap type. So what happened was, they had one that rang its alarm every 15 minutes. This is a 16-hour retreat. Put it in the main meditation hall where you're meditating for 16 hours. So every 15 minutes, the alarm would chime the tune, slightly out of tune. You might know it. It goes, how much is this doggy in the window? I know if you're the one with the waggly, dang, 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 like that. Out of tune, every 15 minutes. So bearing in mind that for at least for the previous 10 years, or maybe 15 to 20 years, I'd trained as a musician. So my ears were micro-tuned to the most subtle and complicated fussy of music. So this, how much is that doggy in the window, would play slightly out of tune, slightly flat, and slightly slowing down as well, as it repeated the theme every time. Every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes. So the moral here is quieter. It's just as sharp though. So I went to the forest to try to control the conditions of my mind. I thought silence was guaranteed, and then I thought it would guarantee depth and endurance, expecting hardship of one kind, and met a different kind altogether. Noise instead of silence, digital bells instead of stillness. Even my attempt to manage the environment only created new disturbances. We attempt to arrange conditions in order to feel secure, but security does not come from perfect surroundings. Life does not obey our spiritual design plans. The lesson was not how to eliminate sound, but how to remain steady within it. Silence is not certainty. Stability is not control. Sometimes you can be expecting sounds, and sometimes there's a lot of pressure. Musicians and sound artists know about that. There was a time I was in London, and my job was to be the sound effects man. It was in a theatre, in a show in King's Cross, London. This was a very interesting play. It was about a lady who had a relationship with Adolf Hitler. It's a true story. There was a group of sisters called the Mitford sisters. One of them, the youngest one, was called Unity Mitford. She decided that the love of her life was Adolf Hitler. And she was convinced that the unification of Germany and England through him, through Adolf Hitler's invading England, was going to be the best thing that ever happened. And that her love for him was the best thing that could ever happen too. Long story short, it was a play about the story of her life. And I had to play sound effects all the way through, from inside the sound booth. I had them all lined up one after another. Mostly it started with lots of German marching band music. These were all recordings on a CD disc. Mostly it started with brass bands, boots marching, lots of things like that. Lots of other sounds. Press the button, birds tweet. Press the button, restaurant music. Or Austrian restaurant. Other kinds of sound effects came out. But the big moment at the end of the play, after months and months of rehearsal, every precise detail had been controlled. Unity Mitford realizes that Adolf Hitler is really bad news. When she comes to the realization, while she's in Berlin, she goes to a park, sits on a bench, pulls out a revolver, places it against her forehead, and pulls the trigger. At that moment, the guy in the sound booth presses the button which makes the sound of the revolver going off. Bang! It's the end of the play. She collapses forward. The lights go down. It's the end of the play. And the audience claps. So imagine my horror as the sound guy, when I pressed the button, instead of a bang coming out, revolver coming out, what came out was the sound of a German marching band. Completely wrong effect. Months of rehearsal crashed down around me as I failed miserably to press the right button at the right time. It was a nightmare. The director, a wonderful person, actually just brushed it off. It was one of the merciful things I ever came across. And it showed me the stature of his character that he was able to do that. A younger person or a lesser person would have been trying to strangle me for ruining the whole event. It was really an experience of how we deal with control and how the sense of safety that comes from everything going according to plan often fails. Things do not behave exactly the way we design. And the moral is, we rehearse life as if pressing the right buttons will guarantee the right outcomes. We line up our cues, we refine the sequences, we assume that precision equals safety. But control at that level is fragile. One wrong button and the illusion collapses. Security is not the certainty that everything will unfold as scripted. It is the steadiness to meet the marching band when we expected a bang. Life is not controllable at that resolution. What matters is not perfect execution, but the mind that remains balanced when the sound comes out wrong. So with that kind of reflection, look at how you're controlling your lives and accept the non-controllability. It's very important. The meditation, when you look into your experience and let go, that's where the insight comes from. It comes from being able to let go and being able to see that it's not possible to control. It's very, very important that we surrender and awaken and let go.